In this lesson, we're going to walk through configuring a Spring Data project using Spring Boot. Spring Boot is by far the quickest method of setting up a Spring Data project, but as we'll see, you will sacrifice some transparency within your project configuration. So to get started, simply go to File, then go to New, and then go to Spring Starter Project. This is going to open up a dialog that will allow us to establish our Spring Boot project. So I'm going to change the name of this project to Spring Data-Boot, and then we need to provide the type of project, which is going to be a Maven project, and we need to provide the group and artifact IDs for this project. So I'm going to use com.o'reilly.sdata. And for the artifact ID, I'm going to use spring-data-boot. We can go to the packaging option to change the package structure of the application. So we'll use com.o'reilly.sdata as our root package. With this configuration in place, we can click on the Next button, and this will take us to a form where we can select the different components that we would like to see within our Spring Boot project. The Data option allows us to specify which Spring Data project we're going to be using. As we mentioned, there are several Spring Data projects, and getting started, we're going to be working with JPA. So if we click on JPA, we will then have the Spring Data JPA starter added to our POM for the Spring Boot project. Below the data option, you'll notice the database option. So this allows us to specify the type of data store that we will be working with within our project. We're going to use the embedded H2 database for all of our examples. With that selected, all I need to do is hit Finish, and Spring Boot and STS are going to begin building out our project. You see it being constructed on the left within our Package Explorer. If we navigate to our new project and expand it, you'll notice that we have the traditional Maven structure in place, and within that Maven structure, we have our package that we specified, as well as the application.properties file within the source main resources source folder. So let's open up application.properties. Within this file, we can specify our properties for the Spring Data project's configuration. You'll notice that we can take advantage of IntelliSense when using STS to create our application.properties file. So I'm just going to set some options for Hibernate. So the first one we want to set is the create drop value for the DDL auto property. And this just tells Hibernate to build out our schema. Next, I'm going to set our logging level, so we get some debugging output to our console. So I'm just going to set that to debug. And then finally, I'm going to set the spring.jpa.showSQL property to true so we can see our SQL statements be executed by Spring Data. So we'll save that file, and we'll navigate back to our Package Explorer, and within the com.o'reilly.sdata package, we're going to create a new class. So we'll just use the new dialog by hitting Control-N, and we'll select class. This is very simple working with Eclipse, so we're not going to work through that. We're going to call our new class book, and we're going to put it within a data.entities package. With that in place, we simply click on Finish, and our new class will be created. Now this class needs to be annotated with JPA annotations, so we're going to make it an entity, and we're also going to specify a table name of book. Next, we'll import these annotations by holding Control, Shift, and pressing O. This will bring up the Organize Imports dialog, and be sure to choose the javax.persistence.entity type as well as the javax.persistence.table type. Now with our annotations in place, we're going to add some fields to our book class. The first field we're going to add is a long by the name of book ID. We're also going to add a string title as well as a publish date. And we're going to add an integer for the page count. And finally, we're going to add a big decimal for the price. We'll import all of these annotations. Be sure to select java.util.date when you import those annotations. Next, we're going to create getters and setters for each of these fields. So hold Control Alt, press S, and then hit R. This is going to bring up the Generate Getters and Setters dialog, and you can simply select all and click on OK. The final thing we'll do is we will annotate our ID for the class using the ID annotation. So we'll select the java.persistence.id type, and then we will add the generated value annotation, and we'll specify a strategy of type identity. And that simply tells Spring Data how to generate the primary key for this entity. With this in place, we're going to create our next component, which is our repository. So simply go to the com.o'reilly.sdata package, then access the new dialog by hitting Control N, and we're going to create a new interface. This interface is going to be named Book Repository, and we're going to have that interface extend the JPA repository interface. So click on the Add button next to Extended Interfaces, and then simply type JPA repository, and we'll need to specify two type arguments for this interface. So the first is the type of the entity, so book, and then the second is the type of the ID of the entity, so that is a long. With that in place, we simply hit Finish, and then we import our types, and we can also add the repository annotation to this new interface. And at that point, our repository is in place. Now we can navigate to our Spring Data Boot application class and begin to write our logic. So the run method returns a type of application context. So we're just going to assign that to a variable named context of type application context. And then we're going to pull out the book repository from that context. So I'll just call that repository. And we can get a bean, and we'll just specify the book repository as the type of the bean we would like. And we can now work with that repository in order to persist a book. So let's build out a book first. So we'll set the title on the book, we'll set the page number, and we can set the publish date simply to a new date. We don't need to set all of the fields on this entity for our example. And then we simply use the repository to save our book. And at this point, we have built our Spring Data application, which has been configured using Spring Boot. You'll notice we didn't have to provide much configuration because that is all done behind the scenes by Spring Boot. So we can now run this application. So just right-click within the editor, go to Run As, and then you can select Java Application. And at that point, you'll see the console fire up. And if we expand the console, we will see that our entity has been persisted. So this is how quickly you can establish a Spring Data project with Spring Boot. One caveat to this is that Spring Boot is relatively new. Many folks do not have it running within a production environment, and it does cover up some of the details of your project's configuration.